Hello friends, I'm making cinnamon rolls this morning, and there is a lady that goes to the same church as I do, and she is well known for her yeast rolls and cinnamon rolls that she makes, and this is her recipe. So Carol, if you're watching, you may be cringing and I may be doing it wrong, but this video is for you. I started with a 1/4 cup of warm water in this measuring cup, and I was out of yeast, so I pulled this block of yeast that I had in my freezer out of the freezer last night, and I am adding 2 tablespoons of yeast and 1 teaspoon of sugar to the warm water. I'm stirring that up, and then I'm just going to let it sit for, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. You need to store your yeast in the refrigerator or the freezer, and I have a pickle jar that I'm going to put that in, but I had to wash the pickle smell out of it first. Next, I'm adding 2 cups of milk to another measuring cup and putting that in the microwave for 3 minutes. It needs to be scalded. I'm going to add 1 cup of shortening to that when it comes out of the microwave. You could use butter if you'd prefer, and I am just going to cut that up now so that it will melt more evenly into the hot milk. I'm also going to add 1/3 cup of sugar and 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt. The salt just went in just now. And here goes the sugar and the shortening. This recipe calls for 3 eggs, but I am going to use a substitute for eggs. In the meantime, our yeast is growing. So now I'm just going to add the egg substitute into the shortening and milk mixture, and that is 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, 6 tablespoons of water, and 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil. I use 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of water, and 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil for each egg called for in a recipe. And in the past, when I've made recipes for yeast rolls and cinnamon rolls that called for eggs, I just omit them and then go by feel on how much flour to put into the recipe. But I wanted to try this and see how it would work. But know that you can leave the eggs out of a recipe if you have somebody in your family or a friend who is allergic to eggs. You just may have to add a little bit more water. I mixed that up because the baking powder was a little bit clumpy, and now I'm adding 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And I have to keep looking at the recipe. I have to tell you that I made these last week and I filmed them, but I had to redo it because instead of 2 tablespoons of yeast, I used 1 packet of yeast, which is 2 1/4 teaspoons. And so it was just a mistake that I didn't even catch until after I had made the rolls and we had eaten them. They did not rise as much as I'm hoping these will, but they were still really good. You can see that the yeast got really pasty there, but I'm adding it to the mixer, and don't leave your mixer running when you try to put the milk and shortening mixture in it. That was a bad idea, but I turned it off, and so now I'm going to mix it, and it's also a bad idea to leave the top off. So I'm putting that back on, or putting that on now. Looking for my cup measure, And don't look at my messy drawer there. Finally found it. Putting 6 1/4 cups of flour into the mixer bowl. And I just barely had 6 1/4 cups of flour. It's bread flour I'm using, left into the flour jar. But I did have to go get some more, and you'll see that I keep on adding a little bit more until it gets to the consistency that I want it to be at. So 6 1/4 cups of bread flour. And then I turn the mixer on low just to mix it up together and try and get the right consistency. It looks sticky, but it's really not all that sticky because there's so much shortening in this recipe. And maybe I didn't make it sticky enough. I don't know. We'll see how they turn out. So now I'm putting it on the second speed of the mixer to knead for 5 minutes. So I set my timer for 5 minutes. And through the miracle of editing, it's 5 minutes later. So now I am going to get a really large bowl that I put a little bit of vegetable oil in. I will spread that throughout the inside of the bowl and on my hands, and then get the dough and make it into a ball and put it into the middle of the bowl, and then flip it upside down so that everything's covered with the vegetable oil. Then I'll cover it with a saran wrap, or you can also cover it with a clean kitchen towel if you'd like. It needs to go into a non-drafty place where it can raise. It will take an hour or two to double in size. My power went out during the time that this dough was rising, and so I punched it down, thinking that it would need to rise again before I would have power to film. And so that's why it kind of looks like brains there. It looks kind of weird. I've also gotten my cinnamon out and brown sugar. My counter is clean, and so I am going to roll out the dough onto this counter. I'm putting just a little bit of vegetable oil onto my counter and then spreading it out and then rubbing it on my hands as well. My little disclaimer is that my husband told me that this stains and ruins granite countertops. But what I haven't told him is that I've been doing this for about 10 to 15 years that I can remember. And I have dark countertops, so that may be why they may be stained and I just can't see it. So you do with that information what you'd like to. I'm going to be using a stick of butter on the cinnamon rolls. I'm just trying to shape the dough into a rectangle here. I think that if I had kneaded it a few times with my hands, that it would have been a little more cooperative, but I didn't. So now I am rolling it out with my rolling pin, trying to make a nice big rectangle and pinching the holes back into place as I go. I have a half a cup or 1 stick of butter here, and I am just going to spread that onto the dough. It's very soft and spreadable, and so I am just going to spread that all over the dough. Being careful to get butter all the way out to the edges. Next, I'm going to sprinkle ground cinnamon all over this area. You can put as much or as little as you'd like. Next, I'm putting about 6 large spoonfuls of brown sugar all throughout the dough, and I will make a thin layer of sugar, just using my hands to spread it. What I did last time I made these and forgot to do this time was to pat down the sugar and the cinnamon really well after I spread it on, and that seemed to keep everything in place a little better. Next, I start at the edge closest to me and start rolling up the dough, trying to do it tightly and evenly. When I get to the other end, then I pull the dough up and pinch it into the roll, trying to make a tight seam. I'm using a 10-inch by 15-inch baking sheet that I will spray with vegetable oil cooking spray. And then I'll start slicing the roll into, I think they're like 2-inch pieces that I did. And I'm just using a cutting board and a regular bread knife to cut this. You could use dental floss to cut these, but I've never used it before. And besides, all I have in my house right now is the mint flavored kind. And so the bread knife works well for me. I think that I should have put the pinwheels or rolls closer together. So next time, instead of 3 across, I will put 4 across, and instead of 4 rows, I will make 5 rows. Covering the pans with plastic wrap so that they can raise before I bake them. And that took about 2 hours. So as the rolls rise, I am going to make the frosting, and then it will be ready when they come out of the oven, and I won't have to do it then. I have a stick of butter that has sat on the counter in this bowl for a couple of hours to come to room temperature. I'm adding 4 cups of powdered sugar to it, and then I will blend it with my mixer with a little bit of milk. I'm also adding a capful of vanilla. I start out on the lowest setting, and then as it becomes more mixed, I'll add a little bit more milk and then turn it to the highest setting, and I like to cream it for a minute or two and get it nice and creamy. And there it is. I'm going to stir it up really well and then put it into a Tupperware container so that it will be ready when the rolls are baked. I'm also going to make some orange frosting for some of the rolls because that's what I like. So I'm making the same recipe as the buttercream, except for the stick of butter, I'm using plant butter to make it dairy-free. I used 4 cups of powdered sugar, and then instead of the vanilla and the milk as the flavoring, and to make it creamy, I am going to use orange juice. So these orange rolls would be vegan. So you could make them for people who need to be dairy-free or who have egg allergies or sensitivities, or just for people that are leading a vegan lifestyle. To add some extra flavor, I am going to use my microplaner and put some orange zest into the frosting. I just have these little cuties or mandarin oranges or clementines, and so I used the zest from 3 of those, and then I tasted it. It was a very light orange taste. If you want a stronger taste, then add a little bit more orange zest. So there you have orange flavored buttercream. and I'm just going to put a clean dish towel over it so that it doesn't get hard before I use it. The cinnamon rolls are now ready to bake, and I've got an oven heated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I will put those in for 20 minutes. Here they are after they're baked. I forgot to film spreading the frosting on the cinnamon rolls, but here is a plate that I made up for my daughter and son-in-law, which has the regular buttercream on it. These have such a nice airy texture, and they were really delicious. This is a cinnamon roll with buttercream frosting, and this is one with the orange frosting on it. After the frosting sets for a little while, then I like to package them up individually in saran wrap, and then that way they're easy to grab if somebody wants to take one to work or school. And since the frosting's set up, it doesn't stick to the saran wrap. They also freeze really well this way. So this is my version of Carol's cinnamon rolls made without eggs. I hope you try them, and I hope you love them as much as we do. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.